All right, back to panel drafting. All right, here we go. We are going to talk about section views next, and then we'll get into the plan view, and we'll get into some details too. So you get to kind of see a little bit more of the construction of these panels. Maybe it'll click a little bit more, maybe make a little bit more sense, because looking at a bunch of rectangles on the screen really doesn't do it justice. But yeah, what we're going to do is first, let's make a quick section through these. Because these panels all have the same reveal locations, that also was unplanned, but what it's going to do is make it easier for us, because now what we get to do is we get to kind of use one section view for all these panels, which is great. Helps us build all of the views we need off of these, pending that the reveals stay in the exact same location. Sorry, I kind of did that without talking, but what I ended up just doing there was I made a copy of the first panel set, pasted it off to the side in the blank space, and then I'm going to do my construction line method, and I'm going to take a bunch of construction lines here off of that elevation view and start to generate the vertical points that I need to make my section view. So you can see what I'm doing is I am copying and pasting every bit into where anywhere there's a horizontal change in the elevation, including the floor and the ceiling as well. Okay, so I'm gonna also, well, yeah, I'll copy the wall hatch here too. Okay, and then last thing I want to do before we get into dropping in hardwares and all of that is we're gonna start to draw in like vertical um, lines here based on what we start with the wall, and then we're going to do vertical lines straight down to represent the different pieces of the panels that we need to start with. So this line here is lined up directly with the wall. It is vertically straight down. Now, a couple things you need to think about. Um, kind of referring back to our initial panel hardware video, we did some discussion on panel hardware and what is required for gap between the back of the panel and the face of the wall behind your panel. Um, if you are using the standard panel cleats like we're using here, you need to provide a 1-inch gap between the wall and the back side of that panel. If you are using Z-clips, Z-bars, Monarch Metals Incorporated hardware, you want to show a 1/2-inch gap minimum between the panel, back of panel, sorry, and the face of the drywall. Because we are using panel cleats here, what we're going to do is we're going to use the offset command, and we're going to offset that line 1 inch out here, and then offset that line 0.75 from there. That 0.75 is representing the panel thickness, because unless a panel is constructed out of some kind of specific material, it's going to be made out of 3/4 inch thick material for us here. So with that being said, we kind of have our horizontal indicators and our vertical indicators showing where the panels are going to sit. We're going to go ahead and draw in rectangles to represent the panels now. So we're going to go and type in RECT, rectangle, and we are going to drop in a rectangle from there to there. Oh, see, I'm on the wrong layer. Beginner's mistake. I should be on geometry here. Let's make sure that my current layer is set to geometry, so that way I'm not drawing these on the incorrect layer. All right, going back to rectangles. So drawing in more rectangles here, starting at that point there and stopping at the bottom of the panel there. Okay, and then next one up, we're going to keep doing that same process until we reach the top. So right there to there. Now that we've gotten this far, what we can do is we can eliminate these lines here. They're no longer needed. We can also eliminate these lines here too, because we already have the panels located 1 inch off the wall. We've got the panel heights there. And if I zoom in, it's probably hard to see on that screen, but if I zoom in, you can kind of see those gaps. Now those gaps are going to have to change out for specific types of reveal. So I'm going to circle back to some of the details I mentioned before when we talked about panel hardware, and I'm going to open up a template file, or sorry, a blocks file, where I can kind of show you the visuals of what those reveals are going to look like, so we can kind of see what our end goal is here. Panels. Okay, so panel reveals. When I'm saying we need to do a spline reveal or a 1/4 inch spline reveal, that reveal is going to look something like this. A spline is going to be 1.25 inches wide, like that, by 1/4 inch thick, like that. It goes directly dead center between the two panels, and it's routed into each panel 1/2 inch. So if I dimension that, you can see that there, which will leave you with a gap between your panels of 1/4 inch. Okay, so that's what a spline reveal is going to look like. That is our end goal for panel-to-panel interaction here on our drawing here. This is Onsite's current standard as far as like where a panel meets another panel. You usually are going to want to do a 1/4 inch spline reveal. When we get to the top of the panel, we're going to do something different. We're going to do what's called a full depth reveal. Full depth reveals can look a little different depending on where they are. This is a full depth reveal represented between two panels. But what it really is you have a block of material 3/4 thick with shim behind it, and that block sits behind your panel. This is your panel here, and that block's going to sit right behind that panel. It gets attached to the wall, and then when your panels are seen, if you're standing in the room and you're looking at those panels, you're going to see the gap here as a finished block of material rather than the drywall behind there. So we do need a full depth reveal at the top of our panels, but in between any panel here, we're going to represent that reveal with a 1/4 inch spline reveal. Okay, so let's go back to our drawing. And like we talked about before, if you want, you can actually copy the spline reveal in from your panel tool palettes. It's under reveals and it's right there. You can bring that in if you'd like to, because we just looked at what a spline reveal is. If you want to draw one in, you can using a rectangle. What that's going to look like is you're going to draw in a rectangle here. It's going to be 0.25 thick, or 1/4 inch thick, and it's going to be 1.25 tall in this case. All right, so sorry. Fighting off some hiccups here. Okay, back to it. So splines here. A spline needs to be dead center between the two panels. So in order for us to pull that off, we're going to be using the move command here. We're going to highlight that spline, and then we're going to go and shift and right click, and we're going to say mid between 2 points, and we're going to go from this corner to this corner. What you're going to do from there is you're going to hold down shift and right click once more. I know, surprise, surprise. And you're going to go from this corner to this corner. That will center your spline directly dead center between your two panels there, just like that. Once you're done with that, all you're going to want to do is trim some of these lines out. So just like this. And then what you can do is you can copy the spline to the other panels that have a spline reveal. So that would be any of these that have panels running into panels. So like that, like that. And then this one here is a unique one that is going to be that full depth reveal. So we'll get to that in a second. I know you're eager to see that full depth reveal, but we're going to wait until we get these spline reveals done first. So let's trim these lines out just like that, like we did before. And that should be it. Okay, let's go back to the top. Let's tackle this full depth reveal here. So full depth reveals, the purpose of them is that way you have a little bit of a gap here. Again, like we talked about with panel cleats, when you do put a panel cleat on, it needs to have a 3/4 gap minimum at the very top. That allows for the panel to be lifted up, slid back, and then drop down on top of the other cleat that's attached to the wall. So to draw one of those in, all you're going to do is take the rectangle command, and you're going to draw in a rectangle here. It's going to be 0.75 thick by 1.5 tall, like that. You're going to use the move command, And you're going to line it up with the back of your panel just like this. Okay. And the last step is we're going to use the move command one more time. And we're going to line it up with the back of the panel and align with the top of the ceiling. Behind that full depth reveal, there is a small gap. That gap there is going to need shim. So what I'm going to do is draw a rectangle from there to there. When we go to hatch it later, it's going to look something more like this, where you have that diagonal line to represent there is shim between the wall and the back of that reveal block. Okay, so that is our kind of our panel section. You know, it seems probably very minimal, really not a lot going on, but really that's about it. So what we're going to do with that now is we can delete that view. We're going to take this view and we're going to move it down to where our section views live. Okay, and then the last thing before we move on to the next view is we're going to hatch this to be a to make sense with what our panel standards are. So, like we talked about first up here, let's switch our current layer to hatch. That way, we're not drawing on the geometry layer at this point. And for the shim, all we want to do is take a line and we're going to represent shim by connecting these two dots. You could go the other way as well if you wanted to. There's really no right or wrong way to do that. Just a diagonal line is all it takes to represent there will be shim there. All right, so next up, we're going to go over to our on-site annotation tool palette, and we're going to go over to MDF, hatching, and then MDF vertical. We need to drop in our hatching for these panels because all these will be made with MDF paneling or MDF core material for these panels. And now it's just a matter of playing a game of color by number, essentially, where you're just going to take all those hatches and fill in all these rectangles that we drew earlier today. Okay, all right. So once we get to the bottom, that should be it, and we should be good to go. I am going to add one last thing, and then we'll call this done. Whenever you have a panel or trim touching the floor, it is important to remember that you're going to want to add what's called scribe. Scribe is typically sent to the field with an extra 1 inch of material attached to the bottom of the panel or the trim. It can be more than 1 inch. 1 inch is the standard, but if the floor is really uneven or unlevel, you might need more than 1 inch. In this case, we are just going to show it with 1 inch for right now. We'll go to our polyline command, and we're going to draw a line straight down 1 inch from the top of from the bottom of that panel down. Is going to be shown inside of the floor. Don't get too hung up on that. It is shown that way intentionally. And we're going to move that line now that we got that straight down 1 inch. We're going to go this way, 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch. And then we got to connect this dot to this dot here. That's going to be how you represent scribe on a drawing. I'm putting that on the geometry dash layer because it will be shown with hidden lines. And then you might need to change your line type scale and your properties to something a little bit more manageable. So I'm going 0.125, which should give me some dashes there to represent that there is scribe, but it's shown as hidden because it's below the floor in this case. Scribe, again, just to recap what that is, it's going to allow the installer to make sure that the panels are level with the floor. A lot of times it's used on base trim because if a floor in a building is uneven, unlevel, they'll use that scribe to make sure that the base trim or the top of that panel is all level across the top, even if the floor isn't level. So they will take the scribe and they'll trim it down to whatever that needs to be for that floor to, or for the panel to be level, even with the floor being out of whack. So scribe has a really important purpose out in the field for that reason. It helps keep everything flush and level. If you don't have that scribe there, the other problem that you might see, again, kind of hinting at that, is that you may see a gap at the floor where the floor starts to go down or up. You may start to see a gap or it may just look not incorrect. Like you'll see like a tiny like gap between the floor and the bottom of that panel. So it's really important to show scribe whenever you have something touching the floor like this. There are cases where you won't need to scribe things like metal trim. Metal trim typically won't get scribed because it's harder to actually scribe that, being that it's metal. You have to have a special saw blade to do that. It's also hard because whenever you have a metal finish, if you cut that, usually it cuts into like the actual metal itself, which shows a shiny edge, which we'll talk about that more. But just a heads up, like when you have scribe at the floor, typically you won't see it on metal, but you'll see it on laminate, veneer, different things like that. So you're going to see that quite a bit, or solid too. Anyways, so there's your panels there. So you got your full depth reveal up top and spline reveals in between each panel. We just have to add our panel cleats to the back of these panels now, and this section view is out the door. All right, so plot tools. We need to go over to panels and then cleats. And then you're going to see a series of different cleats. You have wall panel cleat, you got ceiling panel cleat, and you got integrated cleat. We won't get an integrated cleat until we get into the next subject in our training here, which will be islands and die walls. You will mostly be focusing in on wall panel cleats and ceiling panel cleats until we get to that point. Wall panel cleats are exactly what they sound like. If you have panels on a wall, they are going to be using these cleats typically, unless you're using Z-clips. If you have panels on a ceiling, you're going to use ceiling panel cleats. The only real difference between these two cleat systems, profiles are exactly the same. The difference really is the core material. When you have wall panel cleats, they don't need to be as durable. They'll make those out of MDF. If you have ceiling panel cleats, of course, they will need to be more durable because you don't want a panel falling down from the ceiling and hitting somebody on the head. That's made out of plywood, which is a lot more durable here for this application. It's able to hold a little bit more weight as well. So that's only on ceiling panel cleats. Wall panel cleats, again, particle board, and that's all they need to be. When you go to put these in behind your panel, one thing to remember is you can't actually put it in just like this. You do need to have a small gap between that full depth reveal and the top of the first cleat. The reason is if you just put the cleat in here like this, there is no lift-off space because this cleat is screwed into the back of your panel. And right now, what we would have done with that is we would have made like a lock where you're not able to move this panel and cleat up because it's fixed together, and this block is right above that. So what we're going to do is we need to make sure that we at least have a 3/4 inch gap between that top cleat and the bottom of the reveal block. I'm just going to make it 1 inch tall. We don't dimension these either, by the way. They are here to represent how these get installed. Whenever you show panel cleats, to something else to consider is that in between each panel cleat, you will space these at 24 inches on center. So that is our shop standard and our install standard for these. Sometimes there will be smaller panels where you're not able to do that, but in most cases, you're going to show these at 24 inches from cleat to cleat, from center of cleat to center of cleat. So what I'm going to do is use the copy command now. Copy these cleats. I'm going to go 24, 48, and see, like right now, I'm already got to the end of that panel. So what I need to do is I can't exactly leave it that way. What I would like to do is actually move this. I either want to move these down or move this up. I think I'm going to move them down. So right now I got these two cleats. They are 24 inches from center to center. And I'm going to use the move command now. And I'm going to go shift right click, go mid between 2 points. And I'm going to go from the top of this cleat to the bottom of this cleat. And I'm going to use the move command, which will keep these at 24 inches apart. But instead of just snapping it somewhere, what I'm going to do is go shift and right click, go mid between 2 points again. And I'm going to go from the bottom of this reveal block to the bottom of my spline reveal down here. It might look a little weird, but these are 24 apart and they're dead center behind the panel now. So that's what we're looking for. We're going to do the same thing all the way down. So again, right here, starting there at that point, copy these cleats down 24 inches. Copy another set down 24 inches, 48. Let's see. I might be able to fit one more. We'll see. Nope, looks like it's going to be overlapping. So we'll get rid of that one. We'll use the move command again. We're going to highlight all of these cleats that are behind this panel. Okay. And we're going to hit enter, shift, right click, mid between 2 points, going from the bottom of that cleat to the top of the top cleat. And then we're going to go shift, right click, mid between 2 points. And we're going to go from the top of that panel to the bottom of that panel. Got a little bit lost there from zooming in. There we go. That's better. Okay. Let's save here too, just to make sure I don't lose any work. Looked like it was getting a little bit clunky, just to make sure I don't break AutoCAD here. Okay. And then we just need to put cleats on this lower panel, and we should be good to go from there. Again, same method of approach. We are going to copy a cleat down to here. Copy this down 24, copy this down 48. Looks like we can, oh, no, I guess there is one more panel below this one. I'm sorry. We got one more to go. So let's move these. Shift right click, mid between 2 points. And shift right click, mid between 2 points. Sorry, I get lost in the zooms sometimes. There we go. That's better. Okay. Now, if you do recall, these two lower panels are exactly the same height. So what we can do is we can actually copy these cleats, and we can just copy the top corner of this panel and paste it down here to this panel. Because these are equal in height, that's going to make that work out just fine. Okay, so all of our cleats are there. We got plenty of cleats to go around. We got our reveal, fold up reveal at the top, 3/4 inch tall, 1/4 inch spline reveals in between panels, panel interactions, and then we got our spline, 1 inch spline to the floor, or sorry, 1 inch scribe to the floor. Sorry, got my vocab mixed up there. It's near the end of the day. So 1 inch scribe to the floor there, and our wall panel cleats there. Okay, so that's our section view. When we get around to making the details later, we'll talk about what we want to show for that. Typically, all you're going to need to show is a reveal detail for each unique type of reveal. So I don't need to show a detail for this reveal and this reveal and this reveal. They're all exactly the same. So I just need to show one for the spline reveal, add that to the end of my drawing, and then show one for the full depth reveal, add that to the end of my drawing. And that'll cover all the reveal types on this vertical section for details. So then we'll make details off of those. All right. As promised earlier in the video, I did say we were going to import the floor plan. And so to do that, I'm going to save this first and close out of some other things. Not that I need that open right now. I'm going to go to New in AutoCAD. So I'm not going to close out of my drawing, but I'm going to click New to open a separate blank AutoCAD file. When you hit New, typically you'll see all these standard AutoCAD templates. I usually just go with this acad.dwt, which is a standard blank AutoCAD template without a title block or anything in it. It's completely empty. When you do that, it makes things easier. When you go to import your floor plan, you're also not going to bring in extra layers that you don't mean to. So let's go ahead and do that here. If you ever need to import a PDF, let's say you need to bring in a logo, you need to bring in a floor plan, even just a detail, maybe a light fixture, hardware, something like that. If you ever need to bring in a PDF and turn it into lines in AutoCAD, as long as it's a vector PDF, you should be able to use AutoCAD's PDF importer. So all you do is you type in PDF import. It should come up here in red. You're going to click on that. And then at the bottom, it's going to ask you select PDF, underlay, or file. So you'll click on file. The side menu pops up and you're going to go find the file you want to bring into AutoCAD. So in this case, it's our floor plan. So we're going to go to the Proscenium job folder. We're going to go to drawings. We're going to go to architecturals. And we're going to find the construction plan for level 1. Looks like that guy right there. Oh no, I'm sorry. There's actually 2. Make sure I grab the right one. That's the overall floor plan. That is, oh, I'm going to check and make sure I have the right one. I'm so sorry. I don't want to import the wrong one because it does take a couple of minutes to import. So you want to make sure you're grabbing the right file and also making sure you save before you import it because you don't want to lose any of your work. Super important to make sure that we try to do as much as we can to not break AutoCAD here. I kind of like this one better because it shows the majority of the lobby that we need without importing the entire floor plan. So if I went to import 01, that would work, but it's going to import everything here and not just the lobby. So I really want page A-100.00 for my import. So we'll go with that one, hit open. Oops, there we go. This menu will pop up. Make sure that you do match these settings here. These settings are going to be what you need to import your PDF file. Some of these are really important, like this join line and arc segment. So if, for instance, if you had a bunch of hidden lines or a radius sort of line on your drawing, when you go to import it, if this is not checked, they'll come in as individual line segments versus a hidden line. So you want to make sure that is on. Make sure that these PDF data to import settings are checked. And then make sure that like these are on as well. These are also going to be really important too. Now, once you've done that, you can hit OK. And at the bottom, you can see the little barbershop poll going. It's loading, it's bringing it in. Once it's done bringing it in, you should see something like this. It is an exact replica of the drawing as a PDF, but in AutoCAD. So now you can actually take these lines and delete some of the stuff that you don't want. So like for my purposes, like there are a lot of things I don't need here. Let me go back one step. Okay, so you may want to save some dimensions on here. The reason for that is when you import a PDF, it's going to come in at the scale that's on the drawing. So if you have a, say, for example, I have this drawing here, and I'm trying to clean this up. If I were to measure one of these dimensions here, it's going to show up a lot smaller than 12 foot 10. All right, so 12 foot 10 should be 154 inches. So really right now it's showing at 1.6049 inches. So here's where we're going to get into a little bit more complicated AutoCAD commands. So we need to scale this floor plan so it's showing up at full scale. To do that, you're going to use the scale command in AutoCAD. Select the floor plan. Make sure you grab all the lines, all the hatches, all the room labels, everything there. Hit enter. And it's going to ask you for a base point. The base point doesn't matter. It can be anywhere because what that does is it's scaling based on that little point, which doesn't matter to us. What we really care about is at the very bottom here, you can see there's two different options. There's copy and reference. If you click on reference or type in R, what it's going to do is ask you for 2 points. So let's say I wanted to use this point and this point here. And it's going to ask you at the very bottom now, it's going to say specify new length. So when you do that, what it's asking you for is it's asking you for the dimension between those 2 points that you just picked, which would be 154 in this case. So we'll hit enter. Now if I zoom out, you can see that this is a lot larger, which maybe you can't really tell right now, but if I go and click on these 2 points again, you can see that now it's measuring at 1.54 or 154, not 1.6 or whatever it was before. All right, now I can delete all the dimensions because they don't really matter anymore. They're just kind of in the way. And I'm also going to highlight this here, the hatching. Something else cool that I'm going to show you here in AutoCAD is there's a command called select similar. Select similar. If you start that command, it will highlight anything that is on that has the same properties as that hatch you have selected. So now you can go ahead and hit delete. We'll delete all those hatches. It looks like there's still some here. May have had different properties applied to them. But what I'm going to do is do the same thing. Highlight one of those, select similar for the command, hit delete. And then that leaves you with a more cleaned up floor plan. Okay. What we need now is we need to get rid of some of these other things like the elevation calls. We need to get rid of the wall identifiers here. More elevation calls. We're just cleaning this up, really, is all we're doing. Make sure to save anything that's important or relevant to your drawing. Anything else, you are more than welcome to delete. So like room names, I really don't need those. I can get rid of them. These detail calls, they can go away. I don't really need them. And so I could kind of explain this as I'm going through it, but really the moral of the story is if there's stuff there that you don't want, go ahead and delete it. But make sure to save anything that is important to you because you can't get it back once it's deleted unless you undo. But you don't want to sit there and hit the undo button a million times to get back to something. So, yep, just go ahead and clean this up a bit. Remember that if you are selecting things and you want to try to do like some of this, you can do like the green or the blue selection box. So like if you're trying to only highlight things that are inside of that box, use the blue one. If you want to select anything that it's touching, use that green one. Remember how earlier we mentioned that when you import something, you have that checkbox that allows you to connect different line types together. It usually does a pretty good job, but it doesn't always get everything. So some of these clouds that you can see, some of them are connected and others of them are not. How it detects that is if there's a gap in between those cloud lines like these. If I zoom in really close, you can kind of see there's a gap there. It won't connect those lines together because it sees that there's a gap and it thinks it's a separate arc or a separate line. So it does work to some extent, but there's other areas where it does not really do a great job like that, specifically rev clouds, like the clouds that you see there. It doesn't always get every one of those. So it's kind of a little bit lacking in that aspect, but maybe down the road they'll get it more updated and they'll introduce more ways to actually bring in more of the connected lines and things. So anyway, what I want to do here is now that I've got this cleaned up, I'm going to take all of these lines. Oh, forgot that cloud. Sorry, I'm going to take all of these lines now, put them on the layer 0. As you can see, they're kind of all over the place on all these different layers. We don't really want that. If I was to bring that into my CAD drawing for P1, it's going to bring in all of these extra layers that I don't want. It's just going to clutter my drawing, slow things down. One other thing that I like to do is once I've highlighted this, put everything on layer 0, I go into properties and I actually change all of these to this say by layer as well, instead of varies or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to copy this out of here now and paste it into our current drawing. All right, so now we've got our walls for the lobby. Let's go ahead and put these on the existing layer, and then we're going to work on adding our panels to this drawing here shortly. So Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Okay, so let's see. Well, I guess we could just add those panels in now. So we've got, we've got, sorry, lose my voice a tiny bit. We've got a panel that sits right here. We've also got a panel that sits right here. Kind of see it a little bit there, like they've already kind of got it drawn in a tiny bit. I'm going to delete it because what I want to do is draw it in with the dimensions that we have on our drawing here. Same with this too. As nice as it is for them to have drawn that in, I am going to redraw this panel in, making sure that it matches up with our gaps and our standards here. Okay, so one other thing you might be wondering too is because I have this giant lobby, including all of this, I really don't need more than this room here. And so what I can do is I can draw a rectangle around that room, and I can trim everything that sits outside of that room. So kind of what I want to do is take a line straight down to here. Oh, look at that, I'm still on the hatch layer. Oops, sorry. I'll have to get that fixed here. So I'm kind of drawing a box around the room that I want. What I'm going to do then is offset that box. And I'm going to offset it out, let's say maybe like 36 inches, because why not? Just to give it a nice gap between the room and what's happening outside the room. Okay, then from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in break lines. So let's throw in some break lines around the room. Kind of just draw it over top of that rectangle we drew. If you're drawing in break lines and you notice, hey, my break line looks really small, like I can't really see that, it looks too dinky. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go break line, and then at the very bottom you can see there are two options for size and extension. Right now the size is set to 0.25, extension is set to 0.25. Let's go ahead and make that like 1 instead of 0.25. We'll set that to 1, set extension to 1. And now let's go ahead and draw in some break lines. That looks much better. It looks a lot more like what it's supposed to. Okay, so after we've done that, go ahead and trim anything that's outside of those break lines. So highlight these guys and just go ahead and trim anything that's not inside that room. Okay, I have some weird lines here that really aren't trimming. I don't know what's going on with this. And then if there's anything that's not intersecting the break lines, you will have to use the delete key to delete those items because you will not be able to trim those back. That's okay. But now what I'm left with is just the room itself. So that's it. Let's go ahead and move this over. Stick it right there where the plan view is supposed to go. Then we got to add in the panels to the plan view. Once we've done that, then we are pretty much set to start plotting this drawing. So I might take a break in between, get me some more tea, and then we'll plot this thing. So, all right, let's go ahead and jump in and we'll go ahead and draw these panels in. So looking at the plan view, I gotta find that one again, I'm sorry. Crescent level, there we go. All right, once that pulls up into Bluebeam, I'm gonna use that as a reference tool for what I'm doing here. So we know that we have a panel which sits right here. That is right about where we're looking here. So this is the drywall here on this side, and then our panel sits right here. Okay, so we know we need to be drawing on geometry, but that's not where I was going with that. We know that our panels are 3/4 thick. And if we go to our elevation view, we should be able to tell how wide our panel is. So let's go ahead and pull a width measurement off of that panel. Looks like it's 16 inches wide. So we're going to go 16 wide by 0.75 thick. We're going to take that panel now. We're going to stick it on the wall. And then we're going to make it 1 inch off the wall. So 1 inch from there to there. There is some goofiness going on here. I'm going to have to clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to use the stretch command to do that. As a refresher on that, when you use the stretch command, go ahead and click on the bottom right corner of where you're trying to select, and then highlight and then click on the upper left corner of where you want to select. Go ahead and delete or hold down Shift to remove anything from your selection set that you do not want, and then bring that forward like that. I'm not really sure what this is, to be exact. It does show up here, but I think it might just be a piece of furniture, like a planter or something that's sitting in the room. But we know that it can't interfere with our panel, so we have to bring it in and stretch it back a little bit. And then same thing with this here too. This does need to be in line with the side of that wall. Right now, it's off by a little bit, almost a ½ inch. So in order for us to make this work, what we need to do is stretch the wall. Again, when you use the stretch command, start in the bottom left corner, or sorry, bottom right corner, and go up to your upper left like this. Click there. If there's anything you don't want to move, Shift to deselect it. And then once you've selected everything, go ahead and hit Enter. And move your walls if need be. That way your panel is lined up with that wall, just like so. Okay. Move on to the panel up here. So this panel up here is shown at, again, this was that weird one that we thought there was a problem with earlier, but there really wasn't. We discovered what the problem was and figured it out. So your panel is going to go from there to there, which is 41 inches wide. Okay, so it's 41 inches wide by 3/4 thick. So 0.75 thick, 41 wide. Okay, and again, that panel sits right here. Kind of hard to see it, but it's there. So what we're going to do with that is this panel here, stick it on the drywall like that, bring it forward 1 inch, which allows for that gap between the wall and the panel. And then if you remember right, there is a 1 inch gap between this ledge and the start of our panels here. So we need to move that 1 inch this way. All right, so there is still a small gap here, which we need to address because we do need this to be flush with that wall. What we're going to do to fix that is we're going to use the stretch command one more time. We're going to use stretch here, start in the bottom right, highlight, and see, I want to make sure I'm not selecting more than I meant to. Gotta look at that one more time. Okay. So if I go there to there, let's hold down Shift, deselect the break line, deselect this gray line here. And then let's try to shift this in and see what that does for us. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so there is one thing that I kind of forgot to do when we were talking about elevation views, and that is we do have full depth reveals that we need to add whenever you have a panel that meets a wall. So in this case here, although it's not shown on the architecturals this way, it is a company standard that if you have a panel that butts into a wall, you really don't want to just leave it as a joint where the panel butts to the wall, because that means you have to scribe the entire side of that panel, and that's a real pain to do in the field. You can imagine trying to make sure that panel is flush with that wall. Wall is probably kind of curved. It's 23 feet tall, so really you want to make sure that you have a gap here. We're going to make this 3/4 of an inch, and we'll put a full depth reveal here between this wall and the start of our panel. We're going to do the same thing over here as well, because here you got a panel butting into a wall right here. And really, you can't really do that. I mean, you can, but it's going to be a real pain. So we're going to shrink that a 3/4 inch to make sure there's a 3/4 inch gap right there. We'll have to match that on the elevation views, because remember, any change that you make to your drawing, you have to make it to all views that apply to it. So here, this is these panels here. We added a 3/4 gap here to the wall side. So we need to shrink these, and I'm going to use the stretch command to do that. Bring these over 0.75, which will give you a 3/4 inch full depth reveal gap between the wall and the start of your panel. Same thing over here. This one's going to be a little bit more tricky though, because not only do you have that wall there, but you also have a zigzag where the panels butt into that wall. So this is going to be a little bit funky, but I promise you we'll get through it. So we're going to go offset. We're going to go 0.75 here. Okay, and I'm just going to bring that in. I know that that's the wall line, but I'm going to use it to kind of help with making sure these match up. So this here, although it is a polyline right now, I'm going to explode it, which will turn it into standard lines. We're going to bring that reveal down to the floor. And we're going to bring this reveal up to, well, it can stay there actually, because there is a reveal there anyway at the ceiling. But this line needs to come back to here. It needs to come back to where our panel stop. Okay, so once we got that, now we've got a 3/4 inch full depth reveal at the wall side. Actually, sorry, these need a trim as well. That's your spline reveal. Spline reveal is going to stop there. It's not going to carry into that full depth reveal. It's going to stop at the side of the panel. Okay, so once you've got those trimmed, let's make sure the other side didn't have that too. Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, because we used a different approach on that. We stretched that, and this one we offset it. Okay, cool. So now that we have that all situated and cleaned up, we have a full depth reveal at the wall, spline reveals between panels, full depth reveal at the ceiling, and 1-inch scribe at the floor. Again, that is pretty much the gist of what we need to show. Make sure that our plan view does reflect those same exact changes there. We are going to do what we did before with our section view. We are going to hatch our panels in the plan view to represent that these are our panels here. So I'm throwing in the MDF hatch, just like we used on our panels below in the section views. And then I need to throw in the full depth reveals. Just like what we did on our section view, these full depth reveals, we're going to use the rectangle command. We're going to go 0.75 thick, 1.5 tall, and we're going to use the move command to place these exactly where they need to go. So lining up with the back of your panel, lining up with the wall here. You're going to then have a shim, a little bit of shim behind that, and then we're going to hatch this here. Hatch. On the hatch layer, and we'll throw in some shim. Just a simple diagonal line through there is all you need. Okay. Then you got that same exact reveal block there. And we're going to come over to here, and we're going to add these in as well over here. So I need to rotate this one so it's facing the correct way. My MDF should be facing out towards the room. All right. And then we need to add a reveal block here as well. So this one's a little bit different, a little bit more tricky, because this is a 1-inch gap. And over here we're showing shim, but we can't show that shim here because you would see it in the room. So to prevent that, what we're going to do is we're going to draw in a block at 3/4 thick still, but 1 inch tall. switch that to geometry. That block is going to sit right here, snug between the wall and the back of our panel. But I am going to move it in 0.75. That way it's not sitting flush with the side of the panel and it's tucked back a little bit. So that's going to go right about there. Okay, so that's kind of representing the panels there. That's representing the panels there. And then what's left to do is throw in wall and floor hatch for all these walls. So you can just drag and drop that in. What I would suggest is that there are going to be some walls here that are glass, so you don't really need to hatch those. But some of these you should be able to hatch. That's actually supposed to be the railing there, so you really don't want to hatch that. But let's see, what else can we hatch? Let's see, we got walls here. We got walls here. Got walls kind of all over the place here. But really all I'm doing is just kind of throwing in that simple little diagonal wall hatch to represent there are walls behind these panels. That way it's clear what's happening there. And it doesn't leave anything up to interpretation, really. Once I get all this hatching placed, I think I'm going to make the hatching all on the existing layer, since the rest of the walls are drawn with the existing layer as well. And that way, when you show it on the print, it doesn't show up as like something that OnSite is going to plan on providing. It's something that's going to be an existing feature in the field. Okay, so something like that should do the trick. Okay. Once you've gotten all that hatched, like I said before, one thing that we're going to probably want to do is, actually I'm going to hatch this too. I think that's also a wall there. We're going to take all that hatching and we're going to put it on the existing layer. So first things first, if you want to do that, you can select these individually. That's no problem. It's just going to take you all day long to do it. So fastest way to do that is if you highlight one of these hatches and go up to here. Again, that stack of papers underneath your layer properties is called isolate. Click on that. It will isolate anything that's on that layer there. Now you're going to want to be really careful because your panels are still here. You can see them right there. You don't want to select those, but you want to select the wall hatch only. There are other ways to do this too. I can show you other methods of how to do that as well. Let's say you did have all of this stuff here and maybe you didn't want to use that isolate command. Highlight your entire plan view and go into your properties pane. Because another quick way to be able to only show the wall hatch is to go up here and this lightning bolt called quick select. It's up in the right hand corner of your properties. Click on that. This side menu appears and it allows you to quickly select different items that are in your drawing. So let's say I wanted to only select hatching, and I only wanted to select hatching that was a specific pattern. Wall hatch is this ANSI 31 hatch. I wouldn't really expect you to know that, but if you look at your hatch toolbar at the top when you're hatching, sometimes you'll see that. So wall hatches are ANSI 31. You can make sure it says include in new selection set and then click OK. That will only select hatches that are on that specific hatch, what do you want to call it, hatch pattern. So now that that's all selected, what I can do is go up here, go to existing, change the layer for all those, which will keep all the hatching for my panels all exactly where it needs to be. So again, this is another really quick way to be able to select certain items without selecting everything. So, all right, so that concludes the plan view there. Nothing else to really worry about, nothing else to really mess with. If you'd like, what we can do next is we can plot this, but I'm going to save it as a separate video. That way we're not running too far into the next video because I want to try to keep these as like bite-sized as possible. So I'm going to stop this one, upload it, and then we'll work on plotting the next set of panels here.